This podcast is brought to you by Jupiter Medical Center, rated #1 for quality, safety, and patient experience. Jupiter Medical Center is your choice for world-class healthcare. With state-of-the-art facilities and leading-edge technologies, their award-winning physicians provide the highest caliber of care for the community. Jupiter Medical Center is proud to announce the opening of the all-new Johnny and Terry Gray Surgical Institute featuring the latest in innovative surgical care. To learn more, visit them at jupitermed.com.
Welcome to today's episode of the Palm Beach North podcast, brought to you by your friends at Jupiter Medical Center. I'm your host, Noel Martinez, and with us today, we have Mark Wilson, President and CEO of the Florida Chamber of Commerce. Mark was recently honored as a 2023 Floridian of the Year by the Florida Trend magazine, which is a huge, big deal. This accolade is a testament to his visionary leadership and commitment to advancing the state's economic landscape. Under Mark's leadership, he's done some really big stuff. The Florida Chamber has grown from $4.7 million enterprise to almost $22 million. Under his leadership, the Florida Chamber's influence has grown drastically, expanded beyond traditional business advocacy to address social issues such as childhood poverty, mental health, and education. And he also led the charge to develop the Florida 2030 Blueprint, which is the plan to guide Florida to become the 10th largest economy in the world by 2030. Mark, welcome to Palm Beach North. Thank you so much for being here, and congratulations on your accolades.
Hey, thanks so much. It's really a testament to the Florida Chamber of Commerce and our partnership with all of our local chambers throughout Florida. But it's nice to be here in the north part of the county. You got so many great things going on here.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark. So 16 years. You've been with the chamber now over 16 years. You know, a lot of people don't know about your journey to get to where you're at.
Right.
So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, it all started when I was, 8, 9 years old. I was mowing lawns and I was an entrepreneur from day one. And I sort of, my father was in the retail business. He was a store manager. And so I had an opportunity early on to see how business works, like right up and close and personal. Then one thing led to another. I went to the University of Georgia, business degree. And then after the university, I had an opportunity to go to work for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And I absolutely knew that I think what God had planned for me was, this intersection of business and free enterprise and politics, and not just for the fight of it, but for the free enterprise of it. I think the future of our country really depends on growing the private sector. And so very early on, I had this opportunity to do it at the national level. And after being at the U.S. Chamber for a couple of years, I had an opportunity to go to the opposite end of the spectrum and go be one of the executives at the Chicago Chamber of Commerce. And so I got well versed in local politics, the Windy City, Mayor Daley, and all kinds of things that Chicago brings to bear. And it was a regional chamber there. So I had a chance to do everything from international to small business to advocacy work. And then years later, I got the call from the Florida Chamber that they were really looking to change things up and grow. And it was something that, my family was really interested in. And so we made the move. Originally, we were in Tampa. The Florida Chamber has a grassroots office, or had a grassroots office in Tampa. We did all of our grassroots there, our early political work. And then we moved, we relocated all of that up into our Tallahassee office. And then, as you say, the rest is history. So I've had just about every role in our company except accounting. And so it's really given me an opportunity to see things from just about every role at the Florida Chamber.
So with that comes, with your experiences, you've probably learned a lot of lessons along the way.
Oh, sure.
Right. So, what have you learned from those lessons, and how has that influenced your strategies here at the Florida Chamber?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I didn't recognize it at the time, Noel, but all the way back at the U.S. Chamber, the Chicago Chamber, and certainly the Florida Chamber, I didn't realize I was doing it, but I always tended to seek people who just had the wisdom of making a lot of mistakes before, people who've sort of been down that road before. And, so many people these days just want to, start something and figure it out as they go. And there's nothing wrong with that kind of spirit. But in our business, chambers of commerce have been around for over 100 years. And at the end of the day, it's really a simple and a sophisticated business at the same time. The simple part of it is we try to take thousands of businesses in every single industry you can think of, small business, big business, people who have different opinions, and find that common ground, which is really to support free enterprise and grow the private sector. So over the years, I really believe that one of the secrets to whatever success I've had along the way and sort of advancing through the chambers is to remember we're here to serve our members. This isn't my chamber. I don't own it. It's theirs. And we have to have that service mentality that we're here to make their business better. We're here to make their business climate better. And I think chambers of commerce who realize that that's their role are going to be far more effective than the other way around.
Yeah, amen on that. So in preparing for this, I read an article about there was someone that wrote something about you having this like minister-like vision for the Florida Chamber of Commerce. And I laughed because to me, it's true. Yeah. When I read that, I was like, that is Mark Wilson. Right. So what does that mean to you? And can you elaborate more on that? And how does that guide your everyday actions at the Florida Chamber?
Yeah, I mean, to be called minister-like is about one of the highest compliments that you can get. And I think, funny enough, my older brother is actually an ordained minister.
I didn't know that.
And so he is a futurist and a visionary and has been a very big name and influence in the church movement in our country. And he's working on faith and I'm working on free enterprise. And at the end of the day, it's really the same concepts. It's about leadership and how can you work with thousands of people to advance what those people believe in. And so I view it as a high compliment. And I will tell you, I really do believe almost every speech I have an opportunity to give, I talk about the importance of vision. And ironically, Proverbs 29:18 says, where there's no vision, the people will perish. And it has to have come from my parents and our upbringing. But my brother was a nuclear engineer and then ended up going into the ministry. And, here I am leading chambers of commerce. And I think what we have in common is you start with the end in mind. And I'm a professional back planner, right? If someone says, let's go on vacation, I'll say, well, let's talk about where that's going to be and when, and then let's back our way into how do we get to today. And when you do that, I call that strategy. And I think chambers that are strategic put the long term ahead of the short term. And I think that's probably what people mean when they say that is we just don't waver from our vision and our mission. We say no to more things than we say yes to. And I think that's the signal of a good, strong culture.
So let's talk a little bit about the chamber for those people, because there are going to be people that are watching this or listening to this that don't really know what the Florida Chamber does. So can you talk a little bit about the history of the Florida Chamber, where it's at now, and why it's important to the state's economy?
Yeah, of course. So listen, chambers of commerce in general were created, let's call it circa about 100 years ago. And I think what we would want people to know is we are not the Department of Commerce. A lot of people confuse chambers of commerce with the Department of Commerce. Chambers of commerce are nonprofit, nonpartisan, and pro-business. And as I've always said since I've been in the industry, chambers of commerce are nonprofit and they exist so that businesses in the community don't become one too. So if you think about that, I wish every business in the north part of the county would, when they listen to this, would go online and figure out how to join and invest in the important mission work that you do in the north part of the county. And then after they do that, they can take a look at what we're trying to do statewide, right? Because you mentioned we're the 10th largest, or right now we're the 15th largest economy on the planet, $1.5 trillion economy. And what the Florida Chamber tries to do in its simplest form is how can we make sure the right policies happen at the state capitol with the state legislature to help the private sector grow, a great education system, a great infrastructure, make sure we have mobility happening, tax, litigation, and so forth. If we get it right, then local businesses all over Florida are going to flourish, and then Florida becomes the national model. So at the end of the day, that's what chambers of commerce do. And we have about 200 really good local chambers of commerce in Florida. Yours is obviously a great partner of ours. And then the Florida Chamber, our focus area is the state legislature. We work with the governor's office, the cabinet, and the state legislature, like I say, to try to grow Florida's economy the right way.
Yeah, that's a great way. That's a great way to describe what we do every day. I love that. So the chamber has a strong focus on strengthening Florida's business climate, right? You just talked about that. So how do you balance the interest of these huge corporations and small businesses?
Yeah, so it's a really great question. So I ran the Small Business Council at the Chicago Chamber, and all these years later, the Florida Chamber has a Small Business Council. It's one of our largest councils. Local businesses are the absolute lifeblood of any economy. Most people don't know we have more new business startups in Florida than any other state in the country. Most people think it's Texas or California, but it's actually Florida. So the way we balance that is we view the world as a Venn diagram, right? And so we are not going to get involved in issues that pit businesses against business. There are enough competitors to the free market in Florida. The people on the billboards that want to sue businesses, people who don't want businesses to grow. I could go right on down the line. People who want government to tell businesses who to hire, how much to pay, and what kind of benefits to offer. That's not the marketplace, and that's not what makes America more competitive. So, Noel, the way I view that is we work on a Venn diagram basis. And for example, regulatory certainty, litigation reform, property insurance reform, having the best educated workforce on the planet, and making sure that our kindergartners are ready for kindergarten. And then when they graduate high school, they have all kinds of options, whether that's a college or whether that's going right into the workforce or a CTE program. None of those issues are big business or small business. All of those issues actually help all businesses in Florida compete. And so you will never find us at the intersection of two industries fighting with each other or big businesses and small. We stay so focused, and I think that's why we're so successful on a 10-year basis. Is we stay focused on the things that we can impact, and we stay focused on the things that benefit all businesses.
So the Florida Chamber's mission is to be the driving force behind the future of Florida, right? So how do you define success in that mission? And, what are some of the biggest challenges that we're facing?
Yeah, sure. So let me start with the biggest challenges that we're facing. I think the single biggest challenge to the business community in America right now is apathy among the business community. And what I mean by that, and I mean it affectionately, what I mean by that is our economy, Florida's economy, for example, we're creating 1 out of every 11 jobs in the United States. That's what Florida's doing. When you look at the wealth that's moving into Florida every day to be part of this incredible quality of life we have, this incredible business climate, Florida's adding about $4.5 million of net wealth every hour of every day. That's 3.5 times Texas. It takes states 2 through 10 just to equal what Florida's doing. So a lot of people want to be here. And what that causes is a lot of business leaders to say, well, we're a whole heck of a lot better than New York or where I came from in Ohio or Illinois. So we don't really need to worry about our business climate because we're better than there. And I think we're going to regret that if we're not real focused on making sure that Florida focuses on being a breakaway state. How do we be the best state in the country? So that, and then of course, external issues, socialism and populism are two things that rear their head in government every single day. And they are not congruent with growing the private sector at all. And so those are some of the challenges that we have. I think at the end of the day, what we do is we unify the business community to make sure that the right things happen. And when you look at our mission and what we're focused on to be the driving force, you asked how we measure that. So we have the FloridaScorecard.org that measures how the economy's doing at the county level and statewide. We have the FloridaGapMap.org that measures how all 983 zip codes are doing. And so we stopped a long time ago. We have internal measurements of how the chamber's doing. You talked about our financial success over the last, decade and a half. But that's not enough. None of that would matter if we weren't improving kindergarten readiness, if we weren't making our legal climate better, if we weren't making our tax climate better, if we weren't investing in world-class roads and rail and ports, airports, seaports, and so forth. So the way we measure our success is if the economy is getting better and if we're able to successfully add predictability and sustainability to rules, regulations, and taxes for Florida. And I think the proof is in the pudding that Florida's been making a lot of really good decisions over the last 25 or 30 years. And I think we're seeing the dividends of it now, nowhere more than in the north part of Palm Beach County.
Thank you. Thank you. So community development is a key aspect of what we do, chambers do
Sure.
every single day. Can you just share a specific example of how the Florida Chamber has positively impacted a Florida community?
Yeah, of course. So we have first of all, we have 67 counties and 411 cities. And so I try to visit every county every year. And I will tell you, I could give you dozens of examples, right? But we don't set out one day to say, how can we change this zip code here or how can we change that zip code there? But I'll give you some examples. So I testified in Congress a number of years ago about poverty and what could we do to cut childhood poverty in half. And some people see that as a social issue. We see it as a business issue, right? If we can bring economic opportunity to zip codes with high poverty, with high crime, with low reading scores, right? These people who are born into the wrong zip codes are generally on a dead-end street unless we bring private sector economic opportunity to them. So in Tallahassee, we have zip code 32304. It has more households in poverty than any other zip code in the whole state. So in working with the Federal Reserve and working with United Way and working with our economists, we look at zip codes and we say, hey, what causes poverty and what would help people get out of poverty? And when we highlight that, one of the challenges is food. We have food deserts all over Florida. And so we have members of the Chamber of Commerce who are saying, okay, well, I'm going to bring 45,000 meals into that zip code now that I know that. And we have companies who are using their volunteer hours to actually go into these zip codes and help solve what nobody else is willing to do. So I could give you community after community where we've gone into Crystal River, we've gone into all over the place in Florida. In fact, right here in Riviera Beach, if you look at what the Huizingas are doing in that zip code there, if you look at North End Rise, which is right here in your backyard, it is a national example of what happens when the private sector says, hey, we're not asking these people to leave so we can change the community. We want to change the community so the people that are here can benefit from it. So the work we do, just to be clear, the work we do benefits every zip code. It benefits every county. We don't have winners and losers. We don't pick winners and losers. Everyone can benefit when the economy grows.
So you talked earlier about 200 chambers in the state.
Right.
Right. There's 200 local chambers within the state. Here in Palm Beach County, we have 17.
Okay.
So how does the Florida Chamber work with local chambers like the Palm Beach North Chamber of Commerce?
Yeah. So again, I was blessed in my career to have worked at the Chicago Chamber of Commerce and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And so I sort of grew up thinking, local chambers are so important to the fabric of a community, if you think about it. On one hand, your opportunity insurance, right? When companies are looking at moving into the community, you're usually one of the first people to know about it, and everybody wants to know about that opportunity. But also, if there's a challenge, if there's a permitting issue, or if there's a local ordinance issue, chambers are usually the first ones to hear about it, right? And so I think when we look at working with chambers of commerce, our view is, if you show me a strong chamber, I will show you a strong community. And so our role is to figure out, is there something we can do to help support what you're doing locally? Because Florida's not just one big state. We're 411 cities. And if we can get 67 counties using best practices from each other, competing with each other, who wants to be the fastest and best at permitting? Who wants to have the most well-educated workforce? Which county in Florida is going to be the first one to have 100% of their kindergartners ready for kindergarten and 100% of their third graders ready, right? If you want to see a line, 100 miles long for people to get into a community and move their worldwide headquarters into this area, be the first one to have 100% of people reading at grade level at third grade. So those are the kinds of things that we're doing to help support each other. We couldn't do what we do if it wasn't for local chambers having our back. And we're trying to create a competitive environment in Florida where 411 cities can thrive because of the policies that are coming out of Tallahassee.
So, the Florida Chamber has been an amazing resource to me and my team. We're on the phone with you guys 2, 3, 4 times a week, almost every day,
That's great.
actually.
Yeah.
And the Florida Scorecard. I mean, I talk about the Florida Scorecard all day long. Every chamber event or breakfast that you go to, our stats are rolling through on the PowerPoint because it's so important. I want people to see where we're at and how we're doing and how we compare to other counties in the state.
Right.
So, if you asked me, what the Florida Chamber does is they are an unbelievable resource to local chambers. And we can't thank you enough.
Well, thank you
For all of your hard work.
We always feel like we could do more. So thank you.
Well, I love that. So 2030 blueprint, this is your baby, plan. We're going to be the 10th largest economy by 2023.
By 2030.
2030, excuse me.
Yep.
2030. Thank you very much. 2023 passed us.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the main goals of the Florida Chamber's plan and why is it so crucial to Florida?
Yeah, absolutely. This actually ties to what I said at the beginning of our podcast today, which is the importance of back planning, the importance of knowing where do you want to get, and then how can you be disciplined and focused to actually get there. So listen, right now today, as I said earlier, if we were our own economy, Florida would be the 15th largest economy on the planet. Florida's economy is bigger than Saudi Arabia's. The 10th right now is Italy, right? And so if you think about it, Mexico's one in front of us. Italy is number 10. So said differently, imagine if every business and every elected official in Florida said, okay, what do we need to do to have a really good quality of life, a great environment, a great business climate, and how could we grow to be the 10th largest economy in the world? Those things are not mutually exclusive. You have to do them all. And so at the end of the day, Florida's got about 23 million residents right now. We're going to add 2.8 million more people by 2030. And we have about 10 million people who work. We need to add about 1.2 million more jobs by 2030. We're going to have about 40 million more annual visitors, by the way, on top of the 135 million we have now. And everybody's favorite part of that is we're going to have 2.5 million more drivers on our roads, 2.5 million more drivers on our roads by 2030. So we need to get it right. California, Illinois, New York, they didn't get it right. And now they're all losing population and they're all leading the pack at losing wealth. Taxable revenue, taxable income are moving those states so fast you can measure it. And it's huge. So I think that's what we have to do.
How is the plan addressing those issues, right? How are we going to keep up with all that growth?
Yeah. So, we put that growth out there and then we put our economists and our researchers, we had 8 different research teams working on this. And we said, okay, with that planned growth, if Florida made the right decisions, what's possible? So being the 10th largest economy in the world is possible, but you have to do the right things. And so the research said, well, what are the right things? And again, we have 6 major policy areas. And within each policy areas, we have a total of 39 very, very specific. We don't have time on the podcast to go through all 39, but we have 6 goals in the talent space, the workforce space. They range from kindergarten readiness to 3rd grade reading to 8th grade math and science. We want 60% of our adults to have some kind of post-secondary certificate or degree by 2030. And we want 80% of all of our adults to be ready to work. So we have a very concrete plan. We have programs such as Florida's Future of Work Initiative. We work very closely with the Department of Education and Higher Education to make sure that what we do there is meeting the needs of employers. And we don't have time to go through everything, but innovation and economic development, right? Research and development and venture capital. Florida's number 7 in the country right now on venture capital dollars. And we need to be top 3 by 2030. And this part of Florida that I'm sitting in right now can be a game changer when it comes to research and development dollars, when it comes to venture capital dollars. But for your listeners, I think it's important to know, even though we rank 7th in venture capital, California gets as much venture capital about every 26 days as we get in a year. And we rank 14th on research and development. So think about these amazing universities that we have. Think about the amazing research institutes that are right here in your own backyard. If we could go from 14th in the country in research and development dollars up to top 3 by 2030, we will diversify this economy. It'll be, as I've said many times before, it's like rocket fuel to our economy. So many people know that we're an agriculture, tourism, and construction economy. That's all we used to be 30 years ago. Now, thank God we have those three as a foundation, but now we're so much more than that, from advanced manufacturing, life sciences, bio, homeland security, aerospace. I could go right on down the line.
So let's touch on education.
Yeah, sure.
Cause you mentioned that, here in Palm Beach County, only 48% of our third graders are reading at the third grade reading scores. And we, as a chamber, have a foundation that is very engaged in literacy. It's something that's super important to us in the north end of the county. We have a very diverse region, as you know, right? We have probably one of the highest scoring schools in the county, right? And then we have a bunch that are doing pretty good, but not great. They're not at 100, but then we have some of the lowest. Mm-hmm. So why is that so important? And what is the Florida Chamber doing at the state level? Because I know you guys are doing some great stuff with your foundation. Right. So for the viewers that don't know, let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this, I think, is one of the most promising areas that the business community can engage in Florida. Do you know the number one reason why those scores are so low? It's because nobody knows. Okay, when I travel around Florida, and I travel our state more than anybody but the governor does, I promise. And I get to meet with thousands of businesses all over Florida. And if I just say, hey, show of hands, tell me what percentage of our third graders in our community can read at or above grade level, the typical response is well over 90%. And I say, oh, really? Why do you say that? And they say, well, because if it was anything less than that, our superintendent of schools wouldn't allow it. Our school board wouldn't allow it. Our parents wouldn't allow it. Our realtors wouldn't allow it. And that's a really interesting discovery, because in most communities in Florida, it's around 50%. And if you really want to dig deeper into this, and we have to dig deeper into this, we have some parts of every county where you have 70 or 80% of the kids who are reading at or above grade level. And there are some schools where they're down in the 20s. Noel, it goes beyond that, right? About 72% of our Asian third graders in Florida can read at or above grade level. About 65% of our white third graders, 48% of our Hispanic third graders, and 36% of our Black third graders in Florida are reading at or above grade level. So any way you cut this, I want to reiterate what our goal is. 100% of third graders are reading at or above grade level by 2030. What this is going to demand that a local business community do is what you're doing right now, and what your chamber is so good at, is to simply raise awareness. I don't want it to be, I don't know the names of the schools in this area. So, if there's a Wilson Elementary School, I would rather it be called the 38% school, because nobody would put up with that. The realtors, the bankers, the people who live in that community, everyone would say, we're not going to have a 38% school in our community. What do we need to do to make it 100%? So the great news here is the fundamental problem. Like if I were a doctor diagnosing, what's wrong with the patient, the fundamental problem is the patient doesn't know there's a problem. And so if chambers of commerce literally can use the FloridaGapMap.org, we have every school in Florida that's a public school that produces third grade reading scores. Every single school in Florida, you can go get the percentage of the third graders that are reading at or above grade level, and you can find out the actual number of kids who are not reading at or above grade level. Now, people ask me, what can we do about it? Okay, that's the best part. There's a plethora of promising practices. We can, when I was a little kid and we started off, how did I get into this business? And I told you I was mowing lawns and washing cars and, doing things like that. I think it was the entrepreneurial spirit my parents instilled in me. But you know what? We had companies that sponsored our baseball team and our football team back then. What would happen if every member of your chamber sponsored a classroom and got to know the teacher and went in and said, hey, we want to read to these kids in first grade. We want to read to these kids in second grade. And if a teacher says, hey, here's the equipment that our district can't afford, you think local businesses would be interested in investing in equipment? These are our future workers, right? And so, as I've said before, Noel, if we fix early learning, we fix 1,000 other things. And it's probably the single most promising, area of the work that I do is raising awareness. Because here's the cool thing about businesses. Almost universally, business people are different than a lot of other people. Think about it. Every entrepreneur that you know is in the business of solving problems. They're solving their customers' problems, which is why their business is growing. The same thing's true with education. Once business leaders hear what's going on in that school over there, and there's 94 kids in that school that can't read, every business leader I know says, okay, cancel my afternoon. Let's work on that school. What needs to be done? And I think there can just be a huge renaissance in the business community engaging in especially early learning. It all starts in early learning. And I'll just say this, and I know we need to move on, but the way our brains work is we learn how to read up until we're in third grade. And then after that, we read to learn. And so, and by the way, the way our brains develop, you can't wait beyond that. You can't do this in 5th grade, 7th grade, 12th grade. You can't do this when you're an adult. Your brains have to do it at that age.
Yeah. And, again, education is very important to our chamber. It's
Right.
part of our fabric. We know, we've got 18 elementary schools in Palm Beach North. 17 of them have third grade classrooms because one of them is K through 2, K through 2nd. And in a short amount of time, the business community has come together and raised enough money to fund literacy programs for 2 of those schools.
That's huge.
Huge.
That's awesome.
Huge. So very, very proud of the work. I know a lot of those business leaders are going to be watching or listening to this podcast. So thank you for your support. And if you want to help and do more, let me know. Reach out to me because there's a lot more that we could do. I do have one more blueprint question that I want to get in. I want to talk about high paying jobs because the blueprint talks a lot about the importance of high paying jobs. Why is that so important? And what strategies are in place to increase these type of employment opportunities?
Yeah, so let's think about that. And let's talk about what we're not talking about, first of all. We're not talking about some government fiat that says we're going to take a $19 an hour job and pay $39 to that. That's that socialism, populism disease I talked about earlier. That is not what we're talking about at all. The way that the marketplace is supposed to work is if you've got a skill and I need that skill, I'm going to pay you what I think you're worth. And if another company thinks you're worth more, then they can go pay you more. And I can say, Noel, don't leave. I need to pay you more because you're too valuable to this company. That's literally how free enterprise works. And so what we said was, look, we need, like I say, we have about 10 million jobs in Florida. But if we're going to diversify our economy further into advanced manufacturing and life sciences, if we're going to find cures for cancer, if we're going to be the future of the semiconductor industry, if we're going to figure out what's next in energy, then we need the brightest minds in the world. We need the best laboratories in the world. And we have to be willing to pay people for that. And here's what's interesting. So, a lot of people in our country like to complain about people who make a lot of money. But people who make a lot of money need somebody to work on their cars, and they need plumbers, and they need lawyers, and they need bankers, and they need to eat, right? And they need somebody to take care of their home, and they need somebody, you see what I'm saying? And so when you have an economy like Florida's, the more we can focus on high wage and diversifying the economy, then the more the economy works. Let me give you a quick example, advanced manufacturing, right? We need to make more in Florida so that we can multiply the impacts of that. So for every 10 manufacturing jobs that we create in Florida, there's about 20 jobs that are indirect jobs to support those 10 manufacturing jobs. Think of the legal requirements of moving things around the world. Think of the equipment that you have to buy. Think of the ports and think about the logistics, the rail, the truck, the transfer centers, the warehouses, right? Somebody's got to finance all of that. And so there's a reason, you mentioned the 2030 Blueprint earlier. One of our goals is to become top 5 in the country for manufacturing jobs. We're number 11 right now, and we need to add about 150,000 manufacturing jobs. So what that means is for 150,000 manufacturing jobs, right, that's going to create another 300,000 or so, even more than that, jobs in the ancillary services that are supporting them. So you see how that works? That's why it's important to not only be low wage, low cost.
You amaze me at how many statistics you throw out there at every time. You are like a human statistic guy. I mean, you know them all.
Yeah, not all of them, but it's important that we stay focused on what matters, though.
Yeah, no, absolutely. 100%. So I mentioned it earlier, 16 years at the Florida Chamber. You've had a lot of accomplishments. You've done some really big things. What would you consider to be your most significant achievement? You, Mark Wilson, what are you most proud of?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I get asked that question a lot, and I could take the bait and go down a list of 20 or 30 things. We've had two monumental historic lawsuit abuse reform victories in my time at the Florida Chamber. You might remember in 2002, a group in the Midwest put pregnant pigs in the state constitution, and we woke up and said, "Wait a minute here. If a group can put the rights of animals in a state constitution, then what could some special interest or out-of-state group do?" And so I chaired several efforts to protect the Constitution from out-of-state and special interest groups. So we now have a 60% threshold to pass a constitutional amendment. Signatures, it cost about $8 million to get on the ballot now. It was never supposed to be like that in 1968 when they did the current Constitution. It was supposed to be a door-to-door game, right? Hey, if you want something in the Constitution, go get your signatures. Now you can just buy them, and that's wrong. And so we've had to reform that process, and we've moved the signature deadline back to February 1, which gives voters a full 6 to 8 months to learn, hey, what's actually going to be on the ballot. So I think the thing I'm probably most proud about, it's not lower taxes that we've caused. It's not even the workforce. It's not even the congressional testimony on early learning and the difference we're making in education and the environment and transportation and litigation. I think at the end of the day, a person in my role, it's not about them at all. It's about what have you been able to do to harness and unify and leverage the power of the business community, to take their ideas, to take their muscle, to take their voices, and have the entire business community go after it and win for Florida. And so when I think about these wins, I might get the accolades, but as I tell my team all the time, like our members and our staff can never do more than I can get credit for. And if we remember that, it's really not about what I'm doing at all. If my top job is to try to set that vision and to remind everybody, hey, stay disciplined here. We're trying to get 100% of our kids reading at grade level. We get invited to be part of all kinds of things. And if we said yes to everything that we were invited to, then we would lose Florida's focus on becoming 10th largest economy in the world. So, I mean, the small business wins we've had, I literally could go pillar by pillar, Noel, and I could just tell, I could write a book that would be 100 chapters, and there would be thousands of people starring in that book, from Randy Roberts at Publix way back when, all the way up to just thousands of people right now that have made such a big difference. Governors, including our current governor right now, you have to have other people who have the same vision and have the same beliefs. And again, on that Venn diagram, you've got to have alignment among a whole lot of people. So I think that's our greatest accomplishment over the years, is being able to, put the politics aside and say, okay, what's best for the long term of Florida? And I could give you chapter after chapter of some really cool success stories that when the business community puts their mind to it, they win.
So let's look into the future. And in your opinion, what emerging industries are going to be vital to Florida's future?
Yeah, so I get this question a lot too, right? So everyone's talking about AI, everyone's talking about machine learning, everyone's talking about chips, and those are all going to be important. As a matter of fact, I don't even see those as industries. Those are enablers of every single other industry that we have in Florida, right? And so I think rather than pick one industry or two industries, I think it's, okay, what are the conditions of success that Florida has to have, right? We have to have the best workforce on the planet. We have to have a consistent regulatory environment, which means you can't have 67 counties with 67 different rules. Not anymore, all right? County lines are sort of old school, just somebody drew them on a map. The economy doesn't work that way. I doubt anybody lives in this community and thinks, well, I'd like to shop at that store down the street, but it's in the community next door. It just doesn't work that way. And so I think I think at the end of the day, what we really need to do when we talk about which industries to target, Florida is one of the most diversified economies on the planet right now. And if we can lower the cost of living in Florida and lower the cost of doing business in Florida, and remember, we've got the number one rated universities and colleges in the United States for 7 years in a row now. If we make early learning a priority and you've got the best colleges and universities and you've got the best business climate and the best quality of life, then every industry is going to want to be here. And again, when you're the 10th largest economy in the world, right, you're a global center of international trade. Look at our 15 deep water ports that we have. Look at all of our commercial airports that we have. Florida is not just a mega economy. We have several industries that are growing like crazy in Florida. And I think we don't need to think about it in terms of what 2 or 3 industries can we grow. We have clusters, like I say, from life sciences and R&D and advanced manufacturing, homeland security. Look, we have CENTCOM over in Tampa. That's one of the most important places in the world right now. Do you know how many companies and how much talent are connected in to military installations that we have around Florida? Florida is now the number one aerospace manufacturing location on the planet right now. And so I say we just keep making the economy better. We keep having the best workforce in the country. And there's going to be a line at our border saying, hey, can I move my facility to Florida?
So 2030 is right around the corner. It's right here. So, what is your greatest hope for our amazing state, and how do you see the Florida Chamber affecting that?
Yeah. So my greatest hope for our state is that the 2030 blueprint becomes household conversation around the dinner table. And not just businesses talking at their team meetings every week about, hey, what's going on with volunteerism and early learning. But here's the deal. Free enterprise works. It always has, and it always will. And as the world's trying to figure out where do we go next, what do we do, it's kind of interesting. You asked me early on in the podcast, I told you my brother's a minister, and, there's one vision document out there called the Bible that a lot of people follow and say, hey, it's really simple. Just do what this thing says. And I think the 2030 blueprint is very similar in terms of, okay, we know where we want to be by 2030. And by the way, in 2 years, we'll be working on the Florida 2040 blueprint already, if you can believe that. We know what will work. We know what the rest of the world is doing. We know what our hemisphere is doing. We know what Florida is doing. So my greatest hope is that we can somehow get out of this left arguing with the right, this argument of, are we going to have socialism or are we going to have free enterprise? And if everyone knew, right, okay, that these gaps can be closed. And by the way, when you fix education and you grow and diversify the economy, everyone wins. This is not a winners and losers conversation. This is an everyone wins conversation. So there's no one policy item. If I had to pick one policy item, I would tell you early learning is probably the single most important thing that we have to get right. Like I said, if you fix early learning, you fix 1,000 other things. But my greatest hope, Noel, is that the business community in all 67 counties will really begin working through their local chamber, right, to invest more in local chambers, have more companies supporting local chambers. And then when we all work off the same blueprint, here's the metaphor that I'll give you. We have a lot of aircraft carriers around the world right now. And if an aircraft carrier could have 5,000 outboard motors, and we just took 5,000 business leaders and said, point it anywhere you want to go, that aircraft carrier would spin in a circle. But if somebody said, hey, we're going right over there that direction, and 5,000 people point their outboard motors in the exact same direction, there's no stopping that aircraft carrier. And so while that might sound corny and simple, the business community is an aircraft carrier with way more than 5,000 outboard motors. And if we can slow down long enough to back plan first, hey, does everybody want to go to the same place by 2030? Would we want this for our schools? Would we want this for our roads? Would we want this for our quality of life? The vast majority of people are going to say, damn right. And then chambers of commerce can be that mechanism to say, okay, we're going to unify the business community to get there. That's our hope.
We are stronger together, Mark. You're 100% right on that. So we got to start to wrap some things up here because I could sit here all day with you. So talk to me a little bit about the most valuable piece of advice that you've ever received in your career And really, how has it guided you throughout your career?
Yeah, so that's an easy one for me. When I was at the Chicago Chamber, I had all these big visions and just couldn't seem to execute them. And so Frank Ryle, who ultimately ended up hiring me at the Florida Chamber, he was the president at the time. He had a dear friend. His name was Dick Appland. He's no longer with us, and he used to be the EVP of the Chicago Chamber. And so he took me under his wing, and every Tuesday at 7 a.m., I went all the way downtown Chicago. I lived an hour and a half away. And every Tuesday, every week of the year, he would mentor me over breakfast. And one day he said something to me that just fundamentally was my epiphany, my aha moment. Because I always told him what I was trying to do. I wish we could do this. I wish we could do that. And he finally said, hey, stop. He said, here's what you need to learn. You need to understand that if they understand the why, then the how will take care of itself. And if business leaders would stop and think about that for a minute, our why of free enterprise, how do we create economic opportunity and great education for every single resident in the county? That's what's going to lead to a better economy, right? And so I focus so much of my time and energy on coaching and helping elected leaders and people in media and certainly job creators all over Florida to say, hey, we can talk about how we can do things, but let's talk, are we on the same page with why? One of my favorites that I get criticized for is I always suggest, let's talk about money later. Because we've been so trained by the media and by some of our political parties that it's all about money and, we need more money for this and more money for that. And I was like, okay, maybe we do. I could give you that. But what should we do first? Should we set the standard that 100% of our third graders are going to read at or above grade level? And can we talk about the policy changes it would take? Can we talk about businesses going into the classrooms and reading to our kids? And can we ask the teachers, hey, what do you need to help these kids read, right? And at the end of the day, we'll probably come back to we need to put more resources in places that we're not right now. But if all we do is double the amount of money we're putting into a system that's producing 50% of our kids reading at grade level, we're not getting to 100, right? So part of this is, where do we want to go? What are the changes that have to be made? And let's create a stop doing list as well, right? There may be things that need to just go away so that we can focus on what really matters.
All right, 2030 is long gone. 2050, 2060, we're way down the road, right? We're going to look back. What do you want people to say about Mark Wilson when you're long gone, right? What do you want people to say about Mark Wilson and the impact that he had on the state of Florida?
Yeah, I think that I want people to say he did his best. And, the one thing he was known for is finding a way to unify the business community together on the big things that mattered. And I hope that in years past, if anyone's talking about me, I hope they're talking about what the Florida Chamber was able to accomplish because of its members and because of its team in partnership with the legislature, the governor, and others. Because what Florida needs is way bigger than a person and way bigger than an organization. So at the end of the day, we're trying to get everybody aligned behind what matters most. And I hope if anyone's talking about it in years down the road, I hope it's talking about, hey, that's the point in Florida's history when the business community got in the driver's seat and said, we're going to put the long term ahead of the short term. Doesn't matter if you're an R, a D, or an I, or a big company or a small company. On the Venn diagram, it's real clear.
100%. Anything we've missed? Anything you want to leave us with?
Oh my goodness, we've been talking a long time. Like I said before, my encouragement would be anybody who's listening to this podcast, just contact your local chamber of commerce and find out if you're a member. Your company might already be a member, and if you're not, fix it, because chambers are literally driving the future of Florida.
Well, thank you, Mark. I appreciate all you do for us, for our organization, all you do for me at the chamber and our communities. We are very lucky to have you in our state, and very proud of the work that you guys are doing. Your team's absolutely amazing. I know you know that, but I like to say it out loud because they need to hear it. Hopefully they hear that. But to everyone listening at home, thank you again for tuning in. Thanks to Jupiter Medical Center for being such a great supporter of the Palm Beach North podcast. Appreciate all you do. Make sure to share, like, follow, tell all your friends about the Palm Beach North podcast. And we look forward to seeing everybody in a couple weeks. Thank you guys. See you soon.